Welcome everyone. I am very excited to be here today, guest hosting this Lunch and Learn. My name is Georgie Dent and I am a mum of three. I am the Executive Director of a not-for-profit advocacy organisation called the Parenthood. We campaign for positive policy changes for children, parents and families. I would just like to acknowledge that I am on Camaragal country today, and I would like to acknowledge that it is NAIDOC week, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I would encourage you all to take a moment to acknowledge the lands on which you're joining from. Now, a super quick reminder before we set off that the information that we cover today is general in nature and does not take into account people's specific financial situations. So please bear that in mind, and if necessary, seek professional advice that is specific to your own circumstances. Before we get started, I'm going to hand over to Lali from Westpac to do the official introduction to today's session.
So much, Georgie, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lali Rorotunga, and I'm part of the Davidson Institute, which is a dedicated team of financial educators here at Westpac. And of course, I'm a supporter of that gem that is the Ruby Connection. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, wherever you may be joining from. For me, that is on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Also, let's acknowledge that this session is being held during NAIDOC week, which is a precious time for all Australians to celebrate the histories, cultures, and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. With these Lunch and Learn sessions, it's been so wonderful to see the community that's been built and to see people's engagements and knowledge and learning flourish. Thank you on behalf of all the team at Westpac and the Ruby Connection for your support, and a very, very warm welcome for all of you who are joining us today for the very first time. For those that don't know, Ruby is an online community where we can continue conversations about the issues women are talking about while building financial confidence across all generations and ultimately helping to pave a way for a stronger, better future for you. Whether you're starting your financial journey, you're establishing a family, considering or actively investing, or planning for your retirement, the Ruby Connection and community is an empowering and welcoming place to share and learn together. As a parent of three, now a little bit older, not quite bubs, I'm particularly excited about today's session. And today, as we focus on financial fitness for new families and parents, I really hope you're going to learn a lot from today's session. Whether you're discovering that you're just about to become a parent for the first time, or you're already kind of on that pathway towards parenthood and discovering what it takes to be a new mum or even new dad, for those of us joining us who are dads, it's always great to build that financial fitness in this stage of life. We're set for a wonderful discussion, and after today's session, if you want to delve a little bit further, there's a number of resources we've got to help build the financial confidence for new parents on the Davidson Institute that we'll make you aware of. I know there'll be many, many takeaways for all of us that we can continue to share amongst our networks, friends, and people in our broader communities. So please do share what you learn with others to, beyond today. Thank you again. And now I'd like to hand you back over to Georgie.
Thank you, Lali. I have got some questions that I will be asking our panelists today, but for everyone tuning in, if you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A chat and we will do our best to get to it. We would love to hear from you, so feel free to use that function. Now, to kick off, I'm going to get our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Canna, you're a mum, a financial planner, and the founder of the popular financial literacy social media platform SugarMamma TV. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to connect with everyone over lunch break, I guess, for most people, including myself. I am a financial planner. I've been in the financial services industry for 20 years and a financial planner for over 15. I launched SugarMamma TV, oh gosh, almost 7.5, 8 years ago now. And I did it because I realized that my own girlfriends who were smart, intelligent, successful, motivated women didn't understand some key concepts about money. And I could see the stress that it was causing in their lives. And so after a good kick from one of my clients, Chloe Morello, who's a huge YouTuber, I launched SugarMamma TV, and it just went from strength to strength. And now obviously includes podcasts and Instagram, and obviously I have 2 books, The $1,000 Project and Mindful Money. But I'm really passionate about just, I guess, demystifying personal finance and just showing you how a few simple changes in the way that you use money, spend money, save money, even protect and build money can make a huge difference to your overall well-being in life.
Thank you. It's great to have you here today with us. Rebecca, you are a financial advisor and a mum who is passionate about helping families to get the most bang for their buck. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Georgie. So I am a mum of 2. I've got a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, which hopefully we will not be hearing from in today's session. I've been a financial advisor for nearly 10 years now, and I came into that field after getting advice myself and realizing what a groundbreaking sort of change it could make in my life. But long before I was a parent, I was a daughter. I've been a daughter for 30 odd years now, and I've seen how money can make and break families. And so for me to be able to have conversations with individuals, couples and families so that they can be financially comfortable, there's enough other things to worry about in the world. We do not also need to worry about money.
Yeah, thank you. So Loren, you have recently returned to work as a branch manager at St. George in the Westpac Group after having your second child, who I happen to know may have kept you up a lot last night. What do you enjoy the most about your job?
So I think the thing that I love the most about my job is really just being able to help our customers, whether it be buying their first home or a young couple ready to start their family. I really have an opportunity to make a big difference in their life by providing them with support and to help them understand the tools that are available to them to help them with their journey. And in today's session, just to help families understand what tools are available to help them manage their family budget.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, look, let's get into it. Rebecca, the first question I want to ask you is, what are some of the key costs that parents can expect to face during the first year of a baby's life? And roughly how much should they be budgeting?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think we all feel like there's this doom coming of like it's going to cost to have a family, but the unknown can be quite overwhelming. So we think about, I guess, a couple of different categories of cost. You've got like the cost of goods sold, so the things that you're consuming, like that's food, that's clothes, nappies, wipes, those things that are going on a day-to-day basis. I think about some sort of bigger items like clothing, pajamas, shoes, toys, entertainment. Then we go into like some more capital expenses. There'll be cots, bookcases, bikes, when we get to them, as well as just general health and medical that can often run the whole way through. Provided that your child is, reasonably healthy, an average family should be considering increasing their family budget probably $250 up to about $400 a month for those incidental costs. So babies are relatively cheap particularly if they're breastfed, but if you've got a formula fed baby, those costs really kick off from the get-go.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, I still remember our eldest child is 12, so it's been a while, but the cost of prams was fairly terrifying to me even 12 years ago. So I hate to think what that would be like. Canna, what are some of the sort of longer term, key long-term expenses that parents should be thinking about?
Look, they really do range, as Rebecca pointed out, depending on your individual situation and where your value system lies. But I think from a long-term one and a key one, I think the 2 biggest ones are education. that we've talked about the cost of education and how much, if you do value that, you know, the private school education, whether it be secondary or tertiary, that's probably the number one fear, or I guess financial anxiety for most new parents. And then I'd say the second one is actually travel. You know, a lot of parents want to be able to travel with their children, but obviously you've got to factor in an extra seat or multiple seats on an airplane, an extra bedroom, obviously, you know, all those lovely activities that you do as a family on holiday. So, but I'd say by far the number one concern that I hear all the time with clients is the cost of education, and how do we plan and prepare for that, knowing that very easily it can become, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars very, very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just throw in there that when we talk about a key cost with children, early childhood education and care, which is a critical expense if you're thinking about going back to work, which for a lot of families is a not negotiable, because housing costs, the cost of living, and I'm hopeful that potentially that will become more affordable for families in the hopefully in the short term. Loren, what are some of the sort of hidden costs, I suppose, that parents might not be thinking about when it comes to, you know, starting a family?
So I guess the other panelists had some really good suggestions as far as, you know, the prams and all of that we need to think about. But then we also need to look at the best way to manage our finances, and obviously have a bit of a plan in place, you know, just in case baby arrives a little bit earlier. So just getting ahead of the game, making sure that we've done our banking reviews and so forth.
Yeah. Now, Canna, it can be very tempting to splurge on potentially a beautiful cot from West Elm or something similarly gorgeous. Everything there is gorgeous. What are your top tips on keeping costs down, or sort of keeping on top of the costs that families will need to prepare for when they're either having their first child or bringing a new baby home?
Look, it is so easy to get overwhelmed and like overexcited and just, you know, buy this huge bundle of stuff. And, you know, if you jump on these websites, they tell you need this and that and that. And the reality is, if you go and speak to a mother that's got, say, 3 children or 4 children, they'll tell you you need a fraction of all of that. So my advice is obviously to build a list, but check your list with another parent so that you can get the hard and fast, you know, reality of what you do and don't need. My number one tip, though, is the pre-loved economy. You can buy, you know, you mentioned, Georgie, the cost of the pram. You know, you can buy, you know, a top of the range pram, you know, through the pre-loved market, through Facebook or Gumtree for 20% of the price. And, you know, so there's a great way of immediately saving some money. Obviously, build a list, check that list with another parent, look at the pre-loved economy first. And then my other bit of advice is to actually invest in quality rather than quantity, because quite often something quite, you know, especially something that's, for example, a pram that gets like, does some serious mileage, can be thrown in and out of a car, gets bounced up and down stairs. You want a quality pram that's going to go the distance. Otherwise, it ends up being quite expensive if you're having to buy multiple cheap prams. So really do sort of think about quality rather than quantity. And my final tip for parents, and I'm a minimalist, so I'm really quite passionate about this, is buying products that are multifunctional. For example, my children, I've got 3 kids, and we have this incredible baby chair, which converts from a newborn feeding seat to, you know, when they start sitting upright, and then also acts for my toddler as a seat at the table that she's, you know, props her up nice and safely and high at the table. So it actually has transitioned to cover us for basically between 0 all the way to sort of 3.5, 4. Now, if you think about cost per sit, it's incredible value. And yes, that did cost probably a little bit more, but it was well worth the investment. So a lot of, I guess, mindfulness when it comes to consuming. Don't just rush in, like, you know, plan and prepare as much as you possibly can. And you will find that, especially with things like clothing, they grow so quickly. You don't necessarily need to have a huge amount and spend a huge amount of money. Like you will use a fraction of what you think you need.
Yeah, and I think I have to say, when we did end up going down the pre-loved route with both prams that we bought, and it was so sensible because it was literally half the price. And I mean, it looks gorgeous when you get a brand new pram, but honestly, within about 3 minutes of having a baby, they all look worn anyway. So,
and all sorts of gets splashed.
But also the point is, when you do get the quality ones, you get, we got years and years out of the prams that we had, and we bought them secondhand.
Yeah.
Rebecca, what are your sort of top tips for managing long-term expenses when raising kids?
Yeah, it's a good one to think about. I mean, you've got to know your numbers. And I know Canna's a big advocate for this. Like, you've got to understand how your household operates, ideally before you have the baby. But if you're sitting here listening and you've already got a baby, don't worry, it's not too late. You just need to start now. Understand what your household costs to operate, and then incrementally increase that over time as you've got another head or several heads, and the flow on expenses from then. You've got to call a spade. Like, there's no point pretending your life hasn't changed, whilst we might be in all kinds of sort of identity transitions. Financially, you have to address the elephant in the room, which is things are different. If we're thinking about expenses in the next couple of years, we're really looking at managing cash flow, and making sure you've got allowances for the increase in your household expenses for those items that I discussed earlier. If you're talking about things that are several to many years away, like potentially like private education, then investing for that is really critical, so that you're not scrounging when your child's 11 and you're trying to get them into a school the next year. So investing is a really great way to, take advantage of compound interest. It's also a great way of keeping money out of sight for a little bit. And it's quite frankly just going to give you a hell of a lot better bang for your buck. In terms of long-term expenses, though, one of the ones that I think most people don't talk about, which I'm a huge advocate for, is actually investing in the mother's health and recovery post-birth and in those early years, because it's bloody hard to have a baby. It's hard to raise children regardless of which parent you are, but it's, we talk about buying the cot and the pram, but making sure you've got a financial reservation both through pregnancy and early postpartum for women's health physio to deal with pelvic floor issues, for physio because your back is hurting, and seeing that as a really important household expense from the immediate postpartum right through those first few years of your child's life. Because particularly if mum's not functioning, no one's functioning in that household. So it is, I would consider that one of the best investments you can make as a family is to take the health of the mum or primary caregiver or whoever gave birth, whatever your family looks like, investing in it really, really seriously.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think that, as a general rule, I wish this wasn't the case, but I know that for lots of mums in particular, your own well-being often comes last, or it just feels like there's not enough time in the day for everything. And it's very easy to put your health at the bottom of that list. And as you say, Rebecca, that is actually a sort of recipe for disaster. It's the classic oxygen mask on the plane.
Put your mask on, then you help the children.
And then you can, yes, exactly. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Actually, Canna, on the sort of health front, you've been really honest and open about your experience with IVF. And that is often, I think always a pretty significant financial undertaking as well as everything else. Can you talk us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Look, I've done it all. I've done egg freezing, and I've gone through sort of every single different walk of IVF. And I would say after doing it all, everyone's in such a different situation. So the earlier you can plan and prepare for IVF or any sort of fertility assistance is going to take so much stress and pressure off your shoulders. So obviously you need to start the research process if IVF is something you think you might have to embark. Speaking to a doctor, getting an idea of costing and all the different options, because with IVF it's quite complicated. You don't necessarily need the full service, so to speak. Sometimes you only need a certain level of intervention. So what I would suggest is obviously go and talk to a doctor, get upfront a cost of how much that's going to, the total cost of it. Also, my other recommendation is to speak to a variety of different IVF clinics, because they really do vary in cost. Obviously I can't mention people and brands and doctors, but there is a lot more assistance out there when it comes to the range of services and the cost. So, and then obviously start factoring it into your budget. I haven't touched on budget yet because I don't want to bore people. And I know it's a word that kind of not fun for a Friday lunchtime. But, when you have that cost of how much it's going to, impact you, you can start saving up through a separate dedicated savings account. And also you can get a clear idea of, how much treatment you're going to need, how many maybe rounds of IVF, obviously the cost of medication, all the doctor's appointments, the scans, because it really does vary. And I've had 4 pregnancies and each one has costed me a very different amount of money. So that's why I would say really there's no one round figure to plan and prepare financially for IVF. It really does vary, and it depends on which provider you go to. So doing your research, ask as many questions as possible, look at your financials, start, factoring it into your budget so you can, slowly and steadily start saving up. What you're in for. There's no nasty surprises. And then also even long-term, like I've got 3 children and I'm still, paying for egg freezing and embryo freezing, and sperm being frozen. So and I'm not planning to have any more children, I don't think, but I'm still paying those costs. So they still have to stay in my budget. So there's no one situation or one rule of thumb to follow. You've just got to do your research, ask all the questions, and factor that into your own personal financial situation so that you are, prepared. And, as Rebecca perfectly, touched on, also factor in taking care of yourself during IVF. It is a very stressful period. It's also incredibly time consuming because you are in and out of scans, doctor's appointments, blood tests. I know for myself, IVF was not a smooth sailing process. I would get a phone call at 2:00 in the afternoon saying my body was responding, to get back to the clinic within an hour, to pick up new medication and go get another scan. And literally I'd have to drop everything and run. And it was very, very stressful. And it's a time in your life where I look back and go, I wish I'd taken more care of myself. So factoring in to your budget, perhaps cutting back to part-time work, or even maybe taking a sabbatical to really make the most of this experience, because it is incredibly draining. Or maybe it's, you pay for maybe a cleaner to help you out so you're doing less physical work, or you take a holiday before you start IVF, things like that. You really do need to think about all the little costs that come into the process and experience of IVF so that, you can give it its best chance possible of working for you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's so much there, isn't there? And speaking of so much, the time is racing by, which I knew it would. On this subject, there are so many conversations that we can and should be having. Loren, I want to go to you at the moment. A lot of families do look to buy their first home or upsize once babies and children arrive. If I'm on parental leave, can I still apply for a home loan? How does that work?
Yeah, so you can apply. Some banks like Westpac do recognise paid parental leave and your back to work salary as a form of income. So when they're assessing your loan application. So the answer is yes, but it's still really important that you discuss with your bank or your lender your income and outgoings while on paid parental leave. Things that can help to look at are your partner's income, your paid parental leave income, government entitlements, and any savings and investments you might have. And as for your return to work income, this can be verified with a letter from your employer confirming your return to work date and the nature of employment.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's one sort of straightforward part of it, isn't it? Which is welcome. Rebecca, we did touch on this earlier. So the cost of childcare is extortionate. It is not cheap. We know a lot of families do question whether it makes sense financially for both parents, if there are 2 parents, to go back to work and pay for childcare rather than staying at home and not paying for childcare. obviously in the short term that might make sense, but then there's the longer term impact on super when someone doesn't return to work. Can you talk us through the sort of factors that families should weigh up so they make an informed decision?
Yeah, I know this is an area you're super passionate about, Georgie, in early childhood education. It's a really challenging one. And I mean, even in that question, you've used the magic word should a bunch of times. And I really urge people to throw should in the bin, because it has not served our generation, and it's not served women particularly well. And when we go down that road, we start thinking of the marginal cost, which is, you know, I'm returning to work and I'm going to earn this, you subtract this, and this is what we get at the end. And that will get you through the first week or so, but it doesn't serve you and your family in the long term. So we've got to think about career progression. We've got to think about your mental health. Like, I was back to work after 4 months because that was for my sanity. Like, I absolutely wanted to get back into that environment because it was just an important part of who I was. I would have worked for free, to be honest. And so thinking about career, we're thinking about mental health, we're thinking about identity. We are thinking about things like superannuation as well. And it might be thinking about rejuggling things within the household as well, and shifting the caring responsibilities around. Like, it is not a direct correlation of I earn this and this is the additional cost. On super front, though, one thing that I think most families are just completely unaware of is the contribution splitting rules that exist in Australia, which I'm so passionate about. I know we don't have time to go into it today, but please, like, just go Google this. If you are pregnant, have recently had a child, even if you've got a 10-year-old, Google it and potentially go call dibs on some of your partner's super.
Excellent advice. But it is actually, you know, when you look at the super balances and the difference between men and women, and then you layer in the caring responsibilities and the unpaid work that we know women sort of tend to shoulder the vast majority of, that super splitting does make a huge difference.
Massive.
We have got 1 minute left, which I know is not enough for this, but Canna, I just want to ask quickly, do you want to talk through what is paid parental leave and how does someone know if they're entitled to it? What are dads entitled to?
All right, so the paid parental leave is obviously, a government payment to help, support parents in that they can afford to take time off to raise a young family. And it's for people who've had a baby or people who've adopted a baby. And it embraces equality, so men and women can both apply. It's up to 18 weeks worth of set amount of money, but it's income tested and work tested. So you need to have earned under a certain amount of money for the financial year. And there's a certain amount of hours you are allowed to work, but then it starts tapering off. So it's a government payment that's available for most parents as long as they qualify.
Yeah, thank you, Canna. And thank you so much to Loren and Rebecca, and to Canna. Thank you to the Ruby Connection and the team at Westpac and PepTalkHer for putting this on. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to the three of you about these issues. It was quite a long time ago for me that we were sort of in the trenches of this, but I love having these conversations because it is such a big transition, when you go from independent people to being parents, and there's so much wonderful that comes with it, but there's lots to think about, and I think that all of the advice you've shared today is really useful. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who's given us some of your time on your Friday lunch break. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks so much for coming.